So a lot of people have been talking about the Steam Deck lately. It's this new, basically what could have been and should have been the Nintendo Switch Pro. Before that became the Nintendo Switch OLED edition, which is basically Nintendo either trying to be surprised, as they normally try to do, or they just didn't have the materials to produce a proper Nintendo Switch on a mass scale due to scalping, taking up all the semiconductors out of stuff like this to actually probably make it. And this is basically kind of what I'd imagine the Switch Pro would look like, except instead of Nintendo's name, it is Valve's name. And I remember the idea of this being a portable Steam machine. And people for a long time have been wanting to see something like this come out because of one big thing, not just of AAA gaming on the go, minus just having Mario and Zelda and Kirby and stuff like that. On top of all that, also having an emulation machine, a portable emulation machine. Because the Steam Deck can actually load in different operating systems onto it, which means there is a lot more going for the Steam Deck than any Switch Pro would have gone for. Now, I remember when I first found out about this, I had some friends who didn't really care much for it. They thought it was kind of silly, that it was just a portable system that they weren't going to use because they were just going to use their desktops. But then I had another group of friends who were ecstatic about it, and I remember one line that one of my friends said that kind of stuck with me. "This is too good to be true." And I don't know, but ever since then, I started to think, is the Steam Deck really too good to be true? Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the video, I'm just going to stop and say right here, if you are someone who is looking to get a PC, maybe you're on the go a lot, maybe you're not home a lot, you can't really, sit down and have an actual desktop and whatever all the time, you mostly use a laptop for your, production stuff, homework, whatever, you're on a bus, your passenger seat in a car, this is probably for you, especially with the dock where it can connect to a monitor, and you definitely can kind of treat it like a mini desktop in a way. Of course, some of you already know this, you probably already bought it already, and some of you guys are on the fence or looking at Steam and thinking, yeah. But in all, it's great, right? It's basically the Switch Pro we've all been looking for, right? Yeah, and not really, because it's kind of how the two different systems were made. The Nintendo Switch was made for Nintendo games, and those developers had that know-how going into the development of the games. They knew the limitations of the Nintendo Switch hardware before developing the games. The Steam Deck doesn't have that luxury because the games have already came out, and they were basically built with the idea that they were going to be used on much more powerful hardware. Here, we're looking at a 4-core, 8-thread processor. That's not necessarily bad for what you're playing on. You're only going to be able to play at 80p at most, more actively 720p for most games, on a 7-inch screen. And that's not going to be bad for that screen, so you probably don't need something that overkill to run on this thing. I mean, can you max out everything at 720p? Possibly. It's going to depend on the game you want to put on it. But that's also another thing. The storage options are a bit weird. You get the base model with 64 gigs of eMMC storage. Then you have the 256 gigs of NVMe SSD storage. And then you have the 512 gig model. So you first start off with $400 for the 60 gig version of eMMC storage. But then you jump up $129 to 256 gigabytes, about 4 times the storage, and faster NVMe SSD storage. And then you jump up over another $100 to basically double that storage. Now granted, these are all helped by the fact that they do have a micro SD card slot, but when you look at big AAA games and the stuff that they have to load, the textures and everything, an SD card just really doesn't seem like it's gonna cut it. Sure, you could technically replace the internal storage built into the Steam Deck, but Valve never really intended for you to do that, and honestly doesn't even remark about whether or not it voids your warranty by doing so. Of course, this can change and they can decide that no, it would not void your warranty, and at the very least, they can make a teardown guide or have at least someone on YouTube when they can finally get their hands on it when this comes out in December. And then the big question is the M.2 SSD gonna be more expensive than an SD card? And honestly, you'd be surprised. So we're on Amazon here, and we look at the Samsung SD card, 512 gigs. We're seeing that it's about $70, and we all know that SD cards run for about 100 megabytes. That's how fast they get regularly. SSD, let's take a look. 512 gigs. Granted, the 512 gig model is slower than the 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte model. $10 more. And for something like the Steam Deck, where you're going to be putting games like COD, maybe Red Dead Redemption, those games are like 100 gigs more. And when you're looking at stuff like this, you know, if you'd have the option between an SD card and this, I'd say go for the SSD. You're not paying that much more. Now, granted, you can get higher capacities for more money, and in this case, more speeds. And for SD cards, to be fair, you see 256 gigs, $36, 128, $20. So it really just depends on what end of the spectrum you want to go. Now, maybe you're thinking, oh, this would be this way for just the small SSDs, but not the bigger ones. Let's go to the bigger ones here. We're seeing something kind of in between that price. Now, granted, you're not going to be able to throw that in the Steam Deck, but you're still seeing about the same level of storage capacity for not much more. And yes, I am aware that I am comparing two different form factors of the SSD as technically 2280 and 2242, which are technically not the correct size. There are 2230s. But even if we go look at the 2230 models that would be compatible with it, we see $20 for a 128 gigabyte model. That is the only thing I could find on Amazon right now. It's only available on Amazon right now. But if the Steam Deck really picks up and really becomes a popular thing, we can very easily see more models coming out with higher capacity storages. And if we're seeing 128 gigs for just $20, imagine what 250, 512 gigs is going to look like. Honestly, you're probably not going to see prices that much different than this or even this model. And then if we talk about the base eMMC drive one, there's actually articles out there that are saying that they also have an unoccupied M.2 drive. So you could probably get the base model for $400, slap an M.2 drive in there, slap an SD card in there, have the best of 3 different storage devices, and just go nuts. But that's just what I think. If you've already pre-ordered the ones that have the SSD storage in there, you don't even want to think about eMMC because you think it's dumb, or you just don't want to have to deal with the hassle of installing a bigger SSD in there, which I really don't blame you because they really don't intend for you to get in there and tinker with it, even though this seems like the perfect machine to do that with. But what do you guys think? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you pre-order one of the models already? Were you kind of on the fence? Did this convince you of what to kind of do going forward? I know this was a different type of video than what I've normally been putting out. I was trying to do something a little different here. Let me know what you think. Should I do more videos like this in the future? Anyway, have a great day.